This podcast is brought to you by the Dunfield Retirement Residence, a casually elegant retirement community located at Yonge and Eglinton in the heart of Midtown Toronto. Customized living options complement your independent, active lifestyle. Learn more at thedunfield.com.
Hey everybody, we're the Menschwarmers. I'm Jamie. I'm here with my co-host Gabe. Gabe, how you doing, buddy?
I'm all right. We're knee deep in another sports anti-Semitism controversy.
Well, I wanted to start off by saying, obviously there's a really big news story about anti-Semitism in the NBA that we're going to focus most of the episode on. And I am talking, of course, about the great NBA legend Kareem Abdul-Jabbar being honored by the Friends of the Simon Wiesenthal Center for standing up to anti-Semitism. This happened on October 26th here in Toronto. And it was the Center's Spirit of Hope event. He was in front of a crowd of 1,200 people. The pictures from the event are great. If you'd like to see pictures of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and his 7 feet towering over Jews who I'm going to say are 5'8" on a good day. Kareem has been someone we've talked about in the past due to his, I would say, I think at this point it's fair to say, courageous work against anti-Semitism, calling out double standards and anti-Semitism in Hollywood and sports, and he has now rightly been honored by the Simon Wiesenthal Center,
the Friends of the Simon Wiesenthal Center. I want to clarify that just the Simon Wiesenthal Center are and have always been Nazi hunters, which they still are, which kicks ass. But this is the Friends of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, which is sort of like a cultural advancement organization.
Yeah.
They're sort of supporting the Nazi hunters through fundraising and such.
That's right. And so
so they've given Kareem the award.
And so I just want to...
Simon Wiesenthal Center also gave him an award for dunking on some German player back in the 1980s.
Yeah. So just to share something that Kareem said at the event, he said, I get condemnation from people who don't want to see any progress, and I get support from people who understand that what people like Kanye West have to say is intolerable. So again, kudos to Kareem for standing up for this and rightly giving this award. So all of that happened. That was about a week ago, and since then there has, of course, been a more significant scandal of sorts, an NBA anti-Semitism story, and that is, of course, the linking by Kyrie Irving to a documentary called From Hebrews to Negroes, which is based off a book that is sort of based in Black Hebrew Israelite ideology.
Which is sort of based off the protocols of the Elders of Zion.
Yeah, and I should say at the top that we have a great interview with Rivka Campbell coming up. Rivka is a fellow podcaster for the Canadian Jewish News, as well as being the executive director of Beth Tikva Synagogue. She was very gracious to join us and talk a little bit about the origins of Black Hebrew Israelite faith. We think that part of the conversation about Kyrie has not really delved into enough about what exactly BHI talks about and what they do. So we will get into that with Rivka. But just to sort of lay bare the parts of the Kyrie story for anyone who hasn't heard it yet, he linked to this documentary that people sort of, I think, were rightly suspicious of, and then few people having watched it. And I should say, I've watched it as well. I now have watched it. It relies on...
big ups to James. I want to publicly recognize James for sitting through a 3-hour anti-Semitic propaganda video for you, the listener.
Did I have the World Series on in the background? Absolutely. Did I skip through some of the more phrenology parts of the documentary? Yes, but I did watch it. So
of course you would. You have the brain pan of a stagecoach tender.
So yes, the documentary is sort of based on the idea that, or the whole idea of it is that Jews, as we call ourselves, Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews, are just Europeans pretending to be Jews, and that the actual Israelites who lived in Judea at the time of the settling of the Kingdom of Israel migrated to Africa and became the people who comprise all of Africa, and were then taken to North America as slaves, North America and the Caribbean as slaves, and that their descendants, basically all African Americans, are the real Jews. And I don't know what the point of that is at the end. It doesn't really make a point. It doesn't say like they're the inheritors of the legacy of Judaism, or that they're the actual chosen people. It does sort of talk about that, but it all sort of is just fundamentally this Jewish replacement theory, Jews around the world conspiracy theory, and it's all sort of based on that. And I think the points that were most picked upon by people who like me tuned into the documentary were one, a fake quote attributed to Adolf Hitler. Adolf misspelt with a PH, as Gabe thinks is
That's
hilarious. Right. That says that
well, maybe it's a different guy. Maybe it's like the Adolf Hitler from Jersey.
Right. So that fake quote basically says something about the Jews in America have used black labor for their means, that they're using black muscle to create a new world order or something like that. It's not even a real quote, but what it does is say the same thing that the Klan has been saying about Jews and blacks in America for years. And the other sort of most glaring anti-Semitic point is a fake interview with a Jewish person that suggests that Jews invented the myth of 6 million people dying in the Holocaust, and that's the basis for Jewish power in the world, that they all rely on. That Jews rely on the idea that 6 million people died to do what they want in the world now. So those are the really glaring parts. I mean, I would say that on a whole, the documentary's focus is not vilifying Jews or anti-Semitism. Its focus is the sort of extremely, extremely quasi-academic ideas that comprise Black Hebrew Israelite theology, I suppose, is maybe a generous way of putting it. That this sort of using the Bible as a historic document, and then some wordplay about the biblical character Shem and the word Semitic, and then a lot of phrenology and
very bizarre, very,
very poorly done sort of DNA work that I think wouldn't stand up to any scrutiny. So yeah, we got into
it's sort of like a standard run of the mill conspiracy theory. I do also want to point out this is not sort of the first time there's not the first time Kyrie Irving or Kanye West has said something sort of publicly anti-Semitic. In addition to support for parts of the BHI movement, Kyrie has previously said that he thinks the global banking cartel killed JFK, which is often sort of a dog whistle repeated, and that the earth is flat. I'm not quite sure how that has to do with Judaism, but I mean, someone probably knows.
Yeah, I mean,
if you've got a conspiracy theory about Jews and flat earthers, tell us.
Yeah, I mean, along with that, I mean, the anti-vaccination position he took last year, and not playing half the season basically and losing out on millions and millions of dollars in salary was a big story for Kyrie last year as well. So I guess maybe people aren't shocked that this is the person it's happened to. He did tweet out something about Alex Jones a couple months ago, and that actually I think Kareem said something about as well. It was just being like, you're dude. I can't remember exactly what he said, but he did chastise Kyrie for that. So here's the aftermath. Kyrie had a sort of bizarre press conference where he doubled down on the things there. This is all part of his exploration of who he is and research and stuff like that. Sort of all this nonsense. He didn't apologize. He has now, just as of today, they've issued a joint statement with the Anti-Defamation League that both he and the Brooklyn Nets, the team he plays for,
I think is negotiated through his father.
Yeah, I think his stepmom's his agent, so that's probably why they were involved as well. But then both Kyrie and the Nets will be donating $500,000, quote, towards causes and organizations that work to eradicate hate and intolerance in our communities. So I don't know if that means Jewish organizations. I guess I suppose it doesn't have to, but I don't know. I look, I think the thing that we're going to talk about here is that let's take it for granted that what he did was anti-Semitic. I don't think we need to debate that and or play devil's advocate on that. I don't think he needs a lot of deference about he's doing research, investigation, whatever, any of that nonsense you want to say.
He's just asking questions, as we talked about earlier. He's not just asking questions.
He's not. He's an adult. He's 30 years old. He can act like an adult. He can be anti-Semitic. He's not. I think I was listening to Bill Simmons and Raja Bell talk about it earlier today, and both of them were and Raja Bell, knows him, worked with him in Cleveland, was saying he's being influenced by certain people. He's being told things that, and it's like, it's not true. He's not being influenced by anyone. He's the influencer. If you are on Twitter, if you are on any social media that's been talking about this, the amount of people who are echoing what he said and defending what he said is astronomical. It's unbelievable. Doesn't necessarily outweigh the people who are saying, obviously what he did is anti-Semitic, obviously what he did is wrong. But what I'm saying is that he is the influencer. He has a platform, and he knows that. It is that I don't know. It's unnecessary to sort of defend the basis of what he's saying. Let's take him at face value. He's shown us who he is. He believes in this sort of stuff. He is fine. At the very least, playing fast and loose with anti-Semitism and media that I don't know, denies the Holocaust. You can't get more. You don't need more than that. That can be enough.
Right. I would say, yeah, if you're just asking questions, the question, did the Holocaust actually happen, is not a question that is just asked.
Right. I think that's a good point. And
right, like it's something, there's sort of a question of how one gets or uses access to documentaries or sort of material like this. Like there's obviously it is good to question the media, be media literate. That is a perfectly fine thing to do. I would also say that there is sort of a tier of alternative media, your Alex Joneses and the like, that leads you down a rabbit hole into this stuff. And at that point, it's no longer helping you get informed and actively misinforming. And he's certainly crossed that particular Rubicon into anti-Semitism today. So it's not even, these aren't, we're out of the realm of primary sources here.
Right.
Put it that way.
We should say Kyrie did eventually delete the tweet a few days later. And, I guess there's this thing with the ADL. We'll see what happens. I think what has been interesting for a lot of observers, and a lot of people chimed in on this, I think very smartly, both Jews and non-Jews alike in the media and NBA. The guys on TNT last night pretty much all roundly condemned Irving, including Charles Barkley, who spoke about it significantly. And we should say Charles does have a Jewish son-in-law. As we saw videos.
Thanks, Chuck.
You saw him whoring at his daughter's wedding last year. But there really hasn't been any strong condemnation from the NBA. And I think that's been the most interesting thing. Kyrie is a VP of the Players Association. But the NBA hasn't sanctioned him in any way. He hasn't been suspended. This is, as far as we know, a voluntary donation. No one's said in any statement from the NBA, this is in lieu of a suspension or fine. And I think that's been pretty glaring to a lot of Jewish
They're sort of hoping
fans.
It will go away.
Yeah.
Absolutely hoping it'll go away. And you saw, it was written about by friend of the pod, Lewis Keane, in Forward today. But last night there was sort of a group of fans all wearing Stop Anti-Semitism clothing, sort of sitting front row right at Kyrie. I mean, he did acknowledge them, whether he did so begrudgingly, we can't know. But he did sort of acknowledge them and thank them for coming. So, it's something to be said that at least there's some conversations happening going on. But it's really sort of the inaction by the NBA and sort of whether or not it's support, but complicit silence Kyrie is getting is really posed a lot So we're actually thrilled to devote pretty much the entire episode.
So there was one point about this I wanted to talk about, which is that, Charles Barkley in his comments said that he thought the NBA dropped the ball. He thought that Adam Silver screwed up. And the way he put it, and I'll quote him, "I think Adam should have suspended him. First of all, Adam's Jewish. You can't take my $40 million and insult my religion." Now, I understand the basis for that. That Adam Silver has a vested stake here. He should, of anyone, he should be the most, adamant about suspending him. But my feeling is it's actually the opposite. That because he is Jewish, and because he is the commissioner of a league that's 85% black, he does not feel comfortable wading into this territory and saying, "I'm suspending you." I think he knows that his position is always sort of tenuous, and if there isn't support from the players and the owners and all that, he can't continue to be commissioner or can't continue to be.
Yeah, he needs to be a friend to everybody. Yeah.
But I think it is.
He needs to be a friend to everybody.
I think it is a soft bigotry of low expectations situation here. That the majority of the black NBA players who comprise the league would understand the basis for the suspension. And to think otherwise is in itself demeaning. I mean, I on the other hand, there has been a silence from most NBA players that's been pretty disappointing. Obviously, you talk about, you mentioned that when we spoke to Jeff Pearlman, he pointed out the NBA is by far the most progressive league. We've seen NBA players be very vocal and be leaders about this in lots of other ways. And I would say it's disappointing that more people haven't spoken out against Kyrie in this situation.
I think there's probably more at stake than the average fan can think. You mentioned he is a union VP. There could be internal politics involved in doing something like that. There's also, we don't know necessarily what the amount of latent anti-Semitism is going on in the league. My guess is it's probably some mix of, not a lot of exposure as opposed to active malice. Not hearing from somebody who's traditionally been a leader on this stuff like LeBron James, I have to say, is disappointing. But I also think that, as you mentioned, that Adam Silver probably doesn't want to get involved and wade into this for fear of backlash. I think, one of the ironies and protections that the anti-Semite takes advantage of is that anytime they're punished for speaking out against the Jews, it's because the Jews are after them. And I think Adam Silver might be sensitive to that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The Jewish arm that controls the league punishing someone for, in his own mind, speaking truth to the Jews. As you mentioned, Kyrie is even tweeted that he's got an army behind him.
Look, it's like, and
it's not necessarily a direct threat, but it's certainly something Adam Silver has to be aware of.
Look, it's like criticizing someone for being too defensive. There's no way to defend against that without proving them right. If you allege a wide-ranging conspiracy among people that is trying to keep you down and censor any digression against their worldview or whatever. And then you are chastised for speaking out against that. You've sort of been proven right. I mean, I think in this case, I don't know, a suspension, a fine would have been reasonable in this situation. But we haven't. I guess we just got this ADL thing, but we haven't really gotten an apology from Kyrie or an explanation of what this was. So,
and his statement actually notably does not contain an apology.
Yeah, so I think this is just, I don't know, any number of things. I don't think this is the end of it. I guess it's something we'll continue to monitor and continue to talk about. It's disappointing. This is not our first NBA anti-Semitism scandal. Obviously, there was the Myers-Leonard one last year. We talked about in a March 2021 episode. I'm sad to say that I don't think this is the last. I guess I wanted to start this conversation.
Absolutely not.
I wanted to start this conversation with a positive example. Talking about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I think someone we've talked about in the past as well is Ray Allen, who I think was on the board of the Holocaust Museum in DC, or at least has been involved with them and involved with Holocaust organizations a different way. He wrote for the Players Tribune about traveling to Auschwitz, and has been an advocate and an ally and a mensch. Yeah. So I'm not trying to suggest there aren't counterexamples or that there aren't people who are being vociferous about this. Obviously, the former players who
Chuck is another great example.
Former players who
inside the
are
NBA,
part of the media now are willing to speak out about this. But I remain, like many Jews and non-Jews alike, I think, and you as well, a little disappointed with what the response has been and a little mystified by it. So, there's been a lot written about this and talked about, and I think it's been mostly on the right track. But I do think that an element of that hasn't been, I don't know, dived into deep enough, maybe because it's such murky waters, is sort of the origins of Black Hebrew Israelite ideology, what that means for Black Jews and Jews of color here. And I think we're very lucky to be joined by Rivka Campbell to talk about that. So let's go now to our interview with Rivka Campbell.
Did you know April 2023 is Israel's 75th anniversary? In honor of this huge milestone, UJA Federation of Greater Toronto is planning an epic trip to Israel, and all of Canada is invited. Israel's anniversary, Yom HaAtzmaut, is a one-of-a-kind experience. Streets are filled with parties, fireworks, music, and dancing. On UJA's Israel 75, you'll get to join the celebration. 75 is not a regular anniversary, and Israel 75 is not your typical trip. You'll get a truly unique experience of the country, no matter how many times you've been before. With 10 specialized tracks, you can create an itinerary that is totally personalized, whether you're a foodie, an adrenaline seeker, a TV buff, or politically minded. The best part? You can mix and match tracks on different days. Embark on a thrilling adventure one day and a culinary experience the next. Let your own interests be your guide and experience everything Israel has to offer. To learn more about the trip, visit ujaisrael75.com. That's ujaisrael75.com.
So we're very glad to be joined tonight by Rivka Campbell, host of the CJN's podcast, Rivkush. Thanks so much for joining us, Rivka.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
So we wanted to have you on to talk a little bit about obviously the Kyrie controversy and the movie that he tweeted a link to. We've seen people talk a little bit about the parts of it that are anti-Semitic, and we can talk a little bit about that as well. I've watched the documentary. Even calling it a documentary is sort of an exaggeration. It's sort of like a YouTube
video,
somewhere between a YouTube video and a PowerPoint presentation. Except it's 3 hours long. So I say I watched it. I skipped through parts of it, but I did watch the bulk of it. And we want to talk a little bit about sort of what is the Black Hebrew Israelite movement and its relationship with Jews, or I guess mainstream Judaism maybe is the better way to put it, and talk a little bit about that. In the video itself, the main anti-Semitic points that are sort of, I think, things that have been highlighted by other people that's important is there is a reliance on fake quotes, one attributed to Hitler. That's support for this idea of a Jewish conspiracy using black labor in America, which is a sort of, I think, long time, Klan talking point, I guess is the best way to put it. And the other one is this, I think the origin of it is a white supremacist who made up a comment by a Jewish person who was deceased, who I think had been involved in politics. I'm not sure who they were exactly, but it was a totally fabricated interview. And part of that is, Jewish power is based on the idea that 6 million people died in the Holocaust, and that's nonsense, So those are the two main, I would say, overtly anti-Semitic things. Like, no one is going to debate the anti-Semitic nature of those things. Using a Hitler quote as support for your argument in the first place, probably not a great way to start, but fabricating one also, and using it as a...
Worth pointing out that they spelt Hitler's name wrong in the quote. They did. They spelled it with a PH.
I'm sorry.
It's
PH.
Like Adolf.
Fathom that.
Adolf with a PH.
Oh, I'm like with a PH. I'm like,
maybe
that's a trip.
Maybe it was actually some other guy named Adolf Hitler. He just spelled it different. Just saying. But no, they spelled his name wrong. It wasn't a particularly well-researched Hitler quotation.
Yeah. So again, those are sort of the main parts. And I guess the rest of the video is, I would say, a combination of like phrenology and an attempt to use the Bible as a historical document, primary source, in a way that, like, I think any biblical scholar would say, like, okay, this is not the way you could possibly use this to be interpreted. And a lot of, like, I don't know, sort of very like basic level numerology / wordplay, I would say, seems to be the basis of it. So I guess I want to talk talk with you a little bit about, like, what is the basis for Black Hebrew Israelite ideology? Is it inherently anti-Semitic when people talk about that or raise those ideas? And, sort of how that factors into this whole, I don't know, alternate worldview, I guess, of an African-American connection with what they call Israelites.
Right. Oh, whenever I hear Black Hebrew Israelites, like my whole body, that just like a balloon, it just deflates, because it's been something in particular for Black Jews of color, just this entity that has actually made our existence hellish at times.
Okay, so why is that?
Why is that? Because we have this group that, especially when you don't know, when mainstream Jewry doesn't really know who they are. So you have this group who are purporting to be Black Jews, and let's be honest, some of us are like, oh, that's cool. Like, come to our synagogue, speak. And then they perpetuate this story. And, what we need to do is actually dig deeper. So I sometimes liken them to, I compare sometimes to, like, we have Islam, we have Muslims.
Sure.
And then we have the Nation of Islam.
Right.
Okay. So I kind of say they're kind of like our version of the Nation of Islam.
Right.
Okay. I know too, in like research I had done years and years ago, that even, I think now I can't verify this quote, and I don't want to sound like them making up quotes, but apparently, one of the famous heads of that's how I'll couch it. Head of the KKK said they're the black version of us. That speaks freaking volumes. So here's the thing. It is essentially, and I hope I'm saying this accurately, in my opinion, and it's replacement theory. Okay. It's like, you all who are European Jews, etc., and they would probably include me in that mess, or just say that, oh, you're a confused girl. You're a confused black girl. But they basically would say that you're the fake, the frauds, and the phonies. That, they are the original Jews, full stop.
Right.
Come from Africa. We are the original Jews. Basically black people are the original Jews. No basis for that. It's just a form of black nationalism. They have, and they kind of make it up as they go along, because there's nothing concrete. And, we have this group. There's different sects of them, and some of them have been branded as anti-Semitic. 100%. You have, the group that some people, I've never had the pleasure of being in the US and seeing the ones on the street who yell and scream at people and
Right.
look like they're from some blaxploitation movie. I haven't had the pleasure of seeing that, but we have our version in Canada who have literally accosted me on the street corner. I remember when I was like basically a teenager going to, what is it called now? The old Ryerson.
Toronto Metropolitan University.
The university formerly known as Ryerson.
Known as, exactly. And I remember I'd walk down Yonge Street, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, sister, every day. And then one day I was finally turned around and I went, I'm not your bleeping sister. And I went off. But my daughter had the same thing. They've accosted her, and my daughter's like, well, I'm Jewish. No, you're not. Are you? What kind of Jew? We're the real Jews, my sister, and all this chest beating, right? So, but here's the thing. It does damage. It does damage to us as a people. And when you solely also base, it's a flip side of, sometimes what I talk about. They are solely basing who is a Jew actually on the hue of the skin, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, it boggles my mind, actually. And that we fall for that, including African Americans, Black Canadians, whatever. We fall for this. And I remember when I was in Israel, I was speaking to an African American that I know, and we were a Jew that I know, and we were talking about Hebrew Israelites, because there's an offshoot of them in Israel also.
Right. I think that's like, it's a small community. They've gotten some weird status where like they live in Israel, they have a community. They're not, I don't think they're Israeli citizens. Like, no. It's almost like an American colony or something like that in the Negev.
Yeah, it's interesting. I could elaborate a little bit on that too, because I've actually, where I was living when I was in Israel is very close to there. I was in Arad. And so I ran into a lot, including the original ones who landed in Israel. But nonetheless, and I said to her, she said, I said, what is up with this? And because I know the history of the Hebrew Israelites. They came out of Chicago. Some of them bounced to Liberia, and they bounced to Israel, and so on and so forth. And she said, we as a people, she said, sometimes you got to cut us a break. She said, we as African Americans, we struggle because we were brought here. Our history and our the things that made us was stripped from us. And we came here. And she said, some of us just don't know who we are. So we're holding on to whatever we can. And she said, sometimes it does manifest in things like this because some of us just don't know where we're from. So I had a little bit of but just a little bit.
Well, it is an interesting point because I think there are some Black Hebrew Israelite congregations or sects, whatever you want to call it, who are not as, I would say, militant or nationalist with their ideas. Like Capers Funia, who's often sort of the point person as
he is
more mainstream representative of this community.
100%.
I think his approach, I think he would say that they're, now at least in terms of the congregation he runs, is a Torah-based congregation. It has embraced parts of conventional rabbinic Judaism.
Absolutely.
And I think, I guess, and I say this without knowing so much about the practice, but I do have a feeling that it's like, as you were saying, I understand, the African American experience and a distance from a connection with the culture because of slavery or the nature of African American, being enslaved people in North America and the Caribbean, other parts of the world. Absolutely. That the idea of creating a shared history or myth or whatever you want to call it can be incredibly powerful. And I think that that's been a lot of the, Pan-African and Black nationalist movement has relied on that. So the idea of saying, there are parts of Judaism that are, I don't know, admirable or that we can connect to or whatever it is, and we're using that as the sort of allegorical foundation of our community. We do not literally think that we are descendants of Israelites who were scattered through Africa and then reconvened, or in the other BHI thought, that the Native Americans of North America are all the lost tribes as well. But what they're basically saying is, we are a community where we are practicing a form of Judaism, or, we're incorporating lots of mainline Judaism, but we have this sort of shared myth. And I don't know. I mean, there's parts of, just to sort of play devil's advocate a little bit, like there are parts of Judaism that are ahistorical, let's say. I think we know that. For example, the story of Jews being slaves in Egypt is not necessarily borne out by history. And yet we all go to Seders every year and talk and tell that story. And it's a very important part of our culture. Now, like there are some Jews who would, I'm sure, debate you to the death to say that, of course, we were slaves in Egypt. I think there's others who would say, well, it is a story and it's a sort of creation myth that we have. And it's important in that respect, even if it's not literally true or if there's some truth to it and some not. I mean, I don't think, I would think, I don't want to get too deep into the religion here. Some people think Moses parted the Red Sea. Some people don't. But
there's all sorts of magnetic effects and geological implications.
And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm Rivka, and I do not work for a synagogue. You're going, I'm like, oh. No, but I do hear what you're saying.
All that to say, I do think there's a way of sort of doing this that is sort of bridging the gap or going beyond cultures. I mean, I still take your point that you made at the beginning, which is essentially, as a Black Jew, it's difficult having to constantly fend off being associated with a group that does not represent you in any way. And I can, appreciate how difficult
does not represent me, and actually, slanders my people, my Jewish people, makes it, you can incorporate parts of our religion. Christianity does that without saying we are the original Jews. And that's the disturbing bit, right? And it's like, Carter Ben-Ami or whatever his name is, because I always mess up the order of his name. And he was the head of the Dimona bunch. And ultimately, his goal for Israel was to, and I'm using the word literally properly, was to literally take it over and remove the interlopers, the European Jews, right? And replace them with the true Jews, which is us.
Right.
That was all. And people will say, oh, he softened it over the years. No, he did not. He just learned another way to navigate. to navigate, to make it palatable to those around.
Right.
And the people in Israel, yes, you are correct. They don't have Israeli citizenship, but they did strike a deal that they could get, some of them could get permanent residency in exchange for their children would have to serve in the army. And, and some of the younger generations have left it because it does have a very cult-like atmosphere. And so they've left, and some have converted to Judaism and live full lives as Jewish Israeli citizens.
It's there's an example in the sports world, sort of both Jewish and Israeli, but Amari Stoudemire, who's been very vocal about this current sort of issue, is he, in the last sort of 10 years has been on a journey of, being a somewhat outspoken Black Hebrew Israelite. He sort of pivoted his belief and then went through the full conversion process to sort of a more modern Orthodox rabbinic style of Judaism, as Jamie would say. So I think it's sort of a path in, whether if, for some people, as you said, it's leaving the cult-like mentality and a lot of deprogramming. But I think, that where a situation like Kyrie Irving or a situation like Amari Stoudemire separates itself is that Kyrie Irving seems to not have the found reverence of his beliefs that other Black Jews do, especially those who come to it sort of later in their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. when Mr. Stoudemire, when he first, we were all like, that was interesting among us Black Jews were like, oh no, not the HI. Like, why, man? Why are you going to do this to us? And why are you going to Israel and talking like this? You know how hard it is going to be for us to be able to get into the country now?
Yeah.
We were really nervous. We were super freaked out because he has a platform. He was, and as does this person. And it is very I can't even really articulate how disturbing this latest round of, I can't swear, this latest round of poop.
You can swear.
Been, right?
We don't.
You can swear.
Oh, dang.
We've got plenty of potty talk on our show.
You can do better than dang, actually. Here.
Oh, wow. I feel liberated. But, oh, wow. I feel liberated. Anyways, this latest round of shite has done to us, because once again, it's a person of color, an anti-Semitic person of color. So Black Jews are now back thrown out there to have to, and, I'm doing this because this is my choice. But there's some of us who are now going to have to hear, hey, why aren't you speaking up? Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? And it's like, it's bloody exhausting. But, and it's like, oh my gosh, people, for some of this HI stuff, our own Jewish community perpetuated it.
Mm-hmm.
They perpetuated it because they were so afraid of being racist. So you perpetuated garbage that actually has a backlash on Jews of color.
Mm-hmm. And
it's a great point. I think, I was just going to say, I think the focus has, rightly been on anti-Semitism and the anti-Semitism implied in this, but we're probably not taking full account of the degree to which this is affecting Jews of color of all kinds and Black Jews specifically, or Black Jews in Canada and North America, who have to deal with this sort of association and also the burden of people saying, well, why aren't you speaking out on this? And obviously plenty of Black Jews have spoken out on this and rightly so, but it is unfair to demand an expectation of, every Jew of color or Black Jew to have to speak out on this necessarily. Amari was on First Take, an ESPN program this morning, which, he does from time to time. And also he was the Nets coach last year. But I did think it was sort of funny where it's like, you had to have Amari on, like we need to have Amari's take. And it's like, it's a little unfair.
You actually do, but he can speak to it from he speaks to it from a different angle, because we just talked about how, at one point he was on that side kind of mucking around, and then he kind of shifted. Right. So he really can speak to this nonsense. And the thing is, and it's 100%, I'm sorry, like people who trying to also just skirt it, because I know he's trying to say, well, just because I posted it doesn't mean I'm anti-Semitic. And it's like, okay, whatever. The bottom line is, just because you're not calling for death or deaf or however you want to call it, con whatever, just because you're not overtly calling for our death does not make you not an anti-Semitic person. You're still replacing us. The language that you're using, the point that you're making is anti-Semitic by virtue of you trying to erase our existence and replace it with yours, your perceived. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That by virtue is. You don't have to be out there using the K word and all this stuff to be branded as anti-Semitic. You are, dude. You posted bunk that's advocates that we don't count.
There's this bizarre trend I find in a lot of like modern anti-Semitism, especially we find it comes from athletes, it comes in sports a lot, that people sort of believe a lot of negative stereotypes about Jews, but strangely that they're a good thing. Like, oh, Jews are so good with money, isn't that such an advantage in society? Or Jews are so insular, isn't that such an advantage in society? And I feel like a lot of this sort of platforming of just asking questions about a lot of whether it comes from, BHI athletes or just sort of general, the anti-Semitism discourse now sort of hides behind like a fake revelatory view of it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah.
And to me, that at least I think that might explain some of the desire to identify with Jews as like an aspirational people, but not for the reasons we like as Jewish people.
Exactly.
I think it's also interesting that as you talk about the replacement, I was thinking back to the press conference he did sort of in the first couple of days after, and part of what he said was that how could he basically how could he be accused of anti-Semitism when he himself is a Jew, or he's the real chosen person.
Yeah. That was the first thing I heard. That I was like, right. Oh God.
So I find it's such an interesting thing because it's sort of like. It's bad enough, as you say, the replacement is really the hard part. It's bad enough to deal with anti-Semitism. It's worse when someone say, and also, and Kanye has sort of, I know is a different issue, but been wrapped up in all this as well in the same rhetoric and said the same thing about like, how could I be anti-Semitic? I'm a Jew too. And
yeah, come on. Because even you brought up Kanye. One of the things that actually, that does go through my mind every now and then is, I will speak for all Black people. No, I will not. But we all knew this man was batshit crazy when he was talking about his own people.
Right.
Oh, slavery was a good thing and all this stuff. So don't try and tell me I can't be anti-Semitic because I'm a Jew. Kanye West was racist AF, and he's Black.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He was pushing racist tropes as a Black man. So don't feed me that crap.
Well, it is interesting to see the way that this is all sort of played out and how it continues to play out. I mean, it's something we're continuing to, monitor. I'm impressed, I would say, to a certain degree by how long this has stayed around as a story. Like, we're on day 4 or whatever. I feel like often this gets swept under the rug. But I hope it is at the very least, if nothing else, and this doesn't make it worthwhile, but at the very least, it is a way for people to learn about this and learn a little bit more about BHI and its origins and what it is now. And I think for a lot of people, it is a persuasive argument, I guess, to a certain degree. Like, it takes a little bit of, removing critical thinking, but it is a nice story. I can understand the people who are drawn to it to a certain degree. And, having tracked this and continue to, unfortunately read the replies to tweets and things like that, there are a lot of people who are very much on Kyrie's side and either who've watched documentary or been exposed to some of that, some of the BHI ideology and thinking and other media, and they are sort of persuaded. So
of course,
I don't know. I hope there's some change to that.
It's like anything else. Ultimately, people, whether you're Black, white, whatever, ultimately people want to belong to something. They want to have an identity. I mean, they want to, you know what I'm saying? So that's, some of the reason that people are attracted to white nationalist groups. It's like, this is my identity. This is what I'm fighting for. This is my power. This is my strength. This is who I am. We ultimately all need and want that. That's right. And when you're struggling, like I said earlier, and you're struggling for how do I fit in? Who are my people? What is my identity? Then things like these that speak to the bits of you that are missing and gives you a sense of strength and power and belonging, of course are going to be attractive to you. Of course they are.
I mean, QAnon is a perfect example of it going on in America right now too. It tends to attract people who live on their own and may, don't necessarily have much else going on, but it's something that they can share, right? It's a shared, we know something, we're the in group and you're the out group, and we know part of that. I do have a question. I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier. I think you might have hinted at this, but I won't spoil it for the listeners. There's been a lot of discussion over somewhat of a tepid response from the NBA and the NBA Players Association. There's been very little, formal consequences for Kyrie or any player that's sort of spoken in his defense, or silence around the team seems to be moving on, business as usual. The coach, Steve Nash, left yesterday. There's some debate whether it was his decision or not, but he is no longer involved, and they've now hired a replacement coach who in his own right has lost a job due to a sexual assault allegation or experience. So it's not...
They haven't hired him yet, but they will.
They haven't fully hired him yet. They might by the time this episode goes out, but we can talk about that, Everett. So the organization seems to be not moving in the correct direction. But I'm curious as to your... Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I wish people could see my face. I was like, oh, okay. And what's next? Is there a serial killer you need for the ball boy?
Maybe. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. They do call Kevin Durant the Slim Reaper. But I want to know your thoughts on why maybe the NBA, Adam Silver is very interested in social justice and is outspoken and proudly Jewish. Do you have any thoughts on why there hasn't been a more formal response from the league?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's funny because no, for real, because I don't understand it myself. And it's funny. I was having this conversation earlier this evening, and I said, I don't understand why there's been this silence. I said, Kanye West, everybody boom, lost this, gone. I mean, it was like blink, 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 blink. Oh, you blink, blink, boom, everything, right? Nothing. It's this eerie silence. And I'm telling you, I don't know. Like, even this other, it's not the same sport, obviously, but I even think of, poor Colin. Look at the backlash for what he did, that very simple take a knee, and he lost almost everything like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this guy has come out with vitriol and nothing like, even like a simple statement saying the NBA does not support, just something, but it's like crickets.
Yeah.
And he's just like running with it. It's like, are they hoping he buries himself? Like, I'm like, what's your end goal? And you keep clean because he'll just end it himself. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Part of me wonders if that's it. I think there's sort of a low expectations factor here. Like, we're talking about a guy who was, a proud enough anti-vaxxer that he gave up $30 million in order to do it, because he didn't want to get vaccinated. So you wonder if, and
so they're figuring he's going to Darwin himself kind of thing.
Yeah. Like either that or just like he, this is a guy that puts himself in the news constantly for being contrarian and selfish. Let's, maybe we can't expect any better of him.
But then again, Kanye West, he didn't have.
That's true. He's been, as you said,
he's been Meshuggah for like years now. It's like, okay, what's Kanye gonna say today? It's so. But yet, and people, Adidas knew that about him. They knew he was a loose cannon. They can't tell me they just figured that out. Sure. Let's harken back to, the push of what's her face, the singer. We know, you know what I mean? Like Taylor Swift and stuff. Like, we know it's going back a ways. So what is it about the NBA?
You know what? I think that's a good place to leave it, Rivka. We came to you for answers, and you
Did you
left
get
us.
any?
We got plenty, but we also got a question to answer in the future. And I think it's honestly,
that's the Jewish way, my friend.
It's
That's
the Jewish way.
Absolutely.
It's absolutely the Jewish way. Yes,
So honestly, I think that is
we've got
something
three
we're
of
gonna
us
talk about
and
as
5
well.
opinions.
Yeah.
So
It's something we're going to continue talking about because I think that is the most, unfortunately, the most salient point going forward is just that the response has been silent and disappointing. Well, thanks again to Rivka Campbell for joining us and giving us some great information about the BHI movement and what it means for Jews of color like her.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity, and you guys are awesome.
Hi, I'm Meredith Shiner, and I'm the host of a new podcast from Tablet Studios called The Franchise: Jews, Sports, and America. In this limited series, I'll be talking to journalists, athletes, professional sports nerds, and more about the intersections of contemporary Jewish American life and sports culture. This show tackles the big questions like, do we still need Sandy Koufax as our icon? And are the Mets the most Jewish team in sports? And are sports just? But really, it's a show that uses sports as the prism to explore the most pressing issues for American Jews today, from identity to justice to assimilation or lack thereof. The show is serious and fun and serious fun, and I hope you'll listen to The Franchise wherever you get your podcasts.
Huge thanks to Rivka for appearing on our show. She was a great guest and a great conversation. That was a lot of fun. And, sort of brought some real background and intellect and experience into, our interpretation of this most recent NBA controversy. I do want to sort of finish the show tonight, or finish our conversation with quoting Shaquille O'Neal, the big Aristotle known for his wisdom throughout the time in the NBA. And sort of, I'm going to butcher a little bit here, but he says, "This is the game we love and we promote to bring people together. And now we have to answer for what this idiot has to say." And I think that's probably a pretty good, crystallization of his experience and certainly Rivka's of what she told us she's been going through since, whenever a situation like this happens. And it sucks. And we've devoted this whole episode to it because it's urgent and it's interesting and it's worth talking about. But unfortunately, I think Shaq really nailed it when he said we all sort of have to answer for what this idiot has to say.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us. We'll see you back in a few weeks with, just normal stories about like whether Alex Bregman or Garrett Stubbs won World Series MVP. I mean, probably Bregman could theoretically if the Astros win, or,
how did
Auburn
Lance
has
Stroll's season finish?
Auburn has a new athletic director whose name is John Cohen and was somehow born in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Let's dive into that story. That's a good Menschwarmers story.
Let's
find out for next time.
So, story.
I guess this is just sort of like we pay the piper, which is that like every 10 episodes or so, we have to do one about anti-Semitism because there's something that goes on that prompts it. So this is the one for Q4 2022. Hopefully there isn't one again until I'm going to go
until
Q3
the next
2023.
anti-Semitism scandal. Yeah, until then we'll be back with our regular shtetl talk until the next anti-Semitism scandal.
As always, we're produced by the Canadian Jewish News. You can find all Canadian Jewish News content online at thecjn.ca. Please like and subscribe to our podcast. Please follow us at Menschwarmers on Twitter. I would say this week, if you want a clearinghouse for stuff about Kyrie, this has been it. I would say, just off the top, I really recommend Diana Moskowitz's piece at Defector. I thought was great. And
it's on our Twitter account. You can find it on our Twitter account.
And widely shared as well, Jesse Rubinoff's take on Tim and Friends. I thought was great as well. So those are on our Twitter account and worth checking out. And we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for joining us.
The Dunfield Retirement Residence offers customized living options to complement your independent, active lifestyle. Welcome home. Welcome to the Dunfield. Visit us at thedunfield.com to book a personal tour.